Hello, and welcome to Working Lunch, the Slow Chamber's weekly series where we take a moment and get to know more about the key leaders in our community. I'm Jim D'Antona, President and CEO of the Slow Chamber, and today you'll get to be a part of my conversation with the Central Coast New State Senator, John Laird. Prior to his 2020 election, Senator Laird served as Santa Cruz City Council member and mayor, a Cabrillo College board trustee, a California Assembly member, and as the Secretary of California's powerful Natural Resources Agency. In addition to his civic service, Senator Laird has been a longtime community leader and has impacted the Santa Cruz area through work with Santa Cruz Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors, and is a founder of both the Santa Cruz Community Credit Union and the Santa Cruz AIDS Project, which has, since 1985, promoted and provided a comprehensive and compassionate response to HIV and AIDS through education, advocacy, and supportive services. Today, I'm excited to learn more about what initially ignited Senator Laird's passion for public service, upcoming policy priorities, and his larger vision for the Central Coast. Senator Laird, thank you so much for being here and joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Jim.
Well, let's just start real quick. Where are you zooming in from today?
I'm actually zooming in from Santa Cruz, and it's kind of amazing because I just finished an ethics training. I was live on the radio earlier. I did a negotiation session on school reopening, and then when I'm done here, I go on to the mayors of Monterey and then have 8 Zooms after that. So, but the one good thing that I was telling you just before we started is I was really worried, having come to San Luis Obispo really regularly before the pandemic, that I wasn't going to be able to come as often once I was sworn in and in Sacramento every week. And I think I've been in San Luis Obispo every weekday the last 3 weeks. So it turns out that's the only advantage to Zoom.
It's amazing to be able to, maybe not for your mental health, but to be able to jump from meeting to meeting throughout the world in a second. So let's just start real quick. I'd love to know, you've had a long career in public service. Can you tell us a little bit about what was your first foray into civic leadership? Were you a high school ASB president, or was there a movement that initially drove you to government and community service?
I have very carefully never talked about that. I was president of my class all 3 years in high school and was involved in a whole host of community things even then. But one of the key things is both my parents were teachers, and my father was a teacher and then a school principal in a small town of Crockett, California, where that was their entire community. So he was organizing the parades with his friends. He was president of the Lions Club. They were doing all the food drives, anything that was going on in a community. He was really active. And I think I was sort of about 25 when I realized I'd become my father, and it wasn't such a bad thing.
Well, I think that's the key part, right? That it wasn't such a bad thing. Well, so you mentioned a little bit about there. Tell us about your roots on the Central Coast. Were you born and raised here, or was there something that attracted you to the region?
Well, actually, I was in the 4th full class at UC Santa Cruz. It opened, and it was a young, vibrant college, and it was residential. It was no grades. If you get my transcript, you'll find that I pass every class, and you'll get about 30 pages of what my professors wrote about me. And I used to say we competed against ourselves, not against each other. It really helped me launch. I learned how to write. I got honors at graduation because I wrote a thesis on the history of water development in California. And then I've never been away from water as an issue. But that got me to Santa Cruz. And while I left to work for a member of Congress for a couple of years upon graduation, I came back and went to work for the county administrator and have never looked back. Have just been involved in the community for over 4 decades here.
Well, it's so interesting to hear you talk about, obviously, back at Santa Cruz, you're talking about water. I'd actually, before we dig into the Senate issues, I'd love to talk a little bit about your time as the California Secretary of Natural Resources for Governor Brown. Obviously, an incredibly important position for a huge state like California. What was some of your proudest work in that agency?
Well, first, for the uninitiated, I should just say that it's 19,000 employees, $10 billion. It's water, fire, fish and wildlife, parks, energy, conservancies, forests, oceans. It was this broad array. And before I talk about what I'm proud about, you just had these controversies or calamities flying at you that you had no control over. So I was a point person on water for the longest drought in modern history. I was there for a horrible crisis in the Parks Department. I was there when the Oroville Dam happened and we had that crisis. And then the fires we went through, I mean, Paradise happened while I was still there, but Napa, Sonoma, the Rim Fire, all the big surf fires, we just had an array of things. And I was really proud of sort of our oceans work, which was international and in the state for what we did. We have the largest network of marine protected areas really in the world. And we organized internationally about ocean acidification and dealt with a whole host of issues there. And one of the problems is the tribes did not particularly support it. And so I spent the first months negotiating with tribes to accommodate their historic subsistence and ceremonial takes in it, and then they supported the thing. And another one was Nevada. Right at the beginning, Nevada was going to pull out of the compact to save Lake Tahoe, and I just engaged them cold. It led to a year of negotiations. We made major peace with the first general plan redone in 25 years there without a no vote after marathon negotiations with Nevada. And there are many things like that where I just sunk in, negotiated, problem solved, and left things in a much better place than I found them.
And I appreciate that you started us out with a little background, the massive background that is the Natural Resources Agency, because for a nerd, a political junkie like me, a nerd, of course, but there's a lot of people who don't know the massive work that goes on behind the scenes doing all of those things. So appreciate you sharing that. And actually, it kind of leads me to another question of how you think your role as maybe secretary and the work you did there is influenced your perspective and priorities, maybe now that you're a senator.
Well, it's influenced them in ways that when you're secretary, you have to solve the problem. You don't get to just have a press conference and say, they're screwing up over there. You just have to actually do it. And so I think that that's what I really want to bring to this. I did it before in the legislature, and it's like to presuppose a question you're going to ask. One of the bills that I'm working on to introduce is really about fire, because we did a good job of restoring work on prescribed fire, controlled burns. We did the first major goals of acreage to do fire prevention and fuels management. And Gavin Newsom has increased that, but we're just doing it year by year, budget by budget. So I want to introduce a bill that's roughly a 10-year framework and say, we will do this much on prescribed fire in 10 years. We'll do this much on fuels management and on other fire prevention issues, and make the point that it shouldn't just be CAL FIRE doing it. If there's fire safe councils in local areas, we should be supporting them from the state level as well. So I'm negotiating that right now. I'll probably introduce it in about 10 days, but I'm trying to do a framework for fire, and it comes out of the resources where you have to do it. You have to solve it. You can't just sort of say, hey, go do this. It's like, what is this? How do we plan for the budget? How can locals start to rely on what the state is going to do? Because I think the fire season this last year, we're going to see again, unless we take action.
Well, it's perfect. It's almost like I set you up with these questions, because I think it would be from a person's perspective, you see someone who has a statewide perspective as Secretary of California's Natural Resources Agency. And now you've served as an assembly member, you've served as a senator, and that seems to bring a different, maybe district focus. But I'm interested here. So is your thought process towards policy different as a district representative versus that big picture, or do you bring that big picture to that district seat?
I bring the big picture, but the interesting thing is, it's like I retired the day after I was done being secretary, so I was able to run full time for 2 years, and it allowed for a lot of thoughtful conversations. And there was one time when I thought, oh man, on the whole issue of why couldn't you just have a small fee with every water district and take care of the million people statewide that don't have safe, clean drinking water? And then I meet with a water director in the district who says, look, we have a 70-year-old system. We're going to have to replace it with $300 million. Our rate base won't even support the $300 million. We're going to need help for that. And then some people want to put a fee on that goes outside the area that the ratepayer won't understand, and won't understand why it's harder for them to just replace their system. And it's like, I walked away thinking, well, she's dead right. She's just right. We have to figure that out in a different way. And while most of the time your state perspective works really well in serving the district, although you have to make sure that when you do the state, it really serves the district. You're trying to meet a state need and do it. And one of the classic times is we were negotiating the water bond, and I was in a small meeting with Senator Feinstein and Governor Brown, and they said, we just want to do this with like the Delta. And I said, well, you know, there's 1/3 of the state that doesn't get water off the Delta. So you're asking to tax them, and then they get nothing from it, and they have to vote for this. And they both turn on me and say, who are those people? And I said, well, the Central Coast for one. You know, and so you try to figure out, in the end, the water bond did what they wanted on that, but allowed for dams on the Central Coast or water conservation on the Central Coast, or a way that it got money for what the needs were along here, and it balanced it out. So there was something in there that matched. I mean, there's water recycling money in there that really matched for everyone. And that's the goal. Do something that is allowed to be sold at the state level, but benefits the district. And a lot of times they start marching down the path and does these wonderful things statewide, but unless you impact it, it doesn't help the district.
Well, and it sounds like you have a bigger burden than most district representatives then, because it seems most district representatives, like you said, hold the press conference and aren't concerned about that bigger picture. It's only a district focus. So bless you for taking on that burden.
Well, the other thing is that a lot of them have much more homogeneous districts. And this one, if you're driving and there's no traffic and you're going a little above the speed limit, is 3 hours and 15 minutes from one end to the other. And you have urban neighborhoods in San Jose, and you have right up to the San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara County line. And I qualified in the assembly for the rural caucus because there's only 1,500 people in the 70 miles of Big Sur. And so you have Big Sur, you have Diablo Canyon, you have urban San Jose, you have my friends in Santa Cruz that are on their own planet. So you have that diversity throughout the entire district, and then you have to figure out how to meet the needs.
Well, and that the 17th district, as you said, stretches from Santa Cruz to essentially Santa Maria along the coast, probably the most beautiful district in the state. I might be biased, and you know, campaigning typically brings candidates to so many communities along that stretch. Can you talk a little bit about the biggest challenges of trying to campaign on that district, but then add COVID on top of it?
Oh, well, the biggest challenges are that it's just so immense, and it's tough to cluster things in the right way. And so, as I have said before, I came to San Luis Obispo County 25 times in the 12 months before the primary. I would try to put everything together at once, do 10 things, stay overnight, then drive back. And you know, I went through Diablo Canyon and the state hospital in Atascadero and the prison, and I walked Oceana Dunes, and I had coffee with every mayor, and I spoke to classes at Cal Poly, and just I went to the food bank. I went to both homeless shelters. I did rounds at one of the hospitals one morning. I just tried to do everything. And then you have to do that for three other counties in a 4-county district, where I knew all the hospital people in the Monterey Bay Area, but I didn't know them in San Luis Obispo. And I was co-chair of the holiday food drive for our food bank in Santa Cruz, but I didn't know the food bank in San Luis Obispo. And I think a lot of times San Luis Obispo feels like they're part of the district that nobody pays attention to. And I was determined that that wasn't going to be true. And then here comes COVID, and you can't go anywhere. So you have to figure out, because a lot of times you can go to events and just run into lots of people, and you can just have sidebar conversations, and somebody can say, it was really nice of you to say that, but you left this out or something, and you can, you know, you can pick that up and you can know. The other interesting factor is there's more connections than you would imagine. So I went to speak at Trilogy up on the Napomo Mesa, I don't know, a year and a half ago, and I walk in and the first person says, "Hi, John." And I said, "Well, I wondered where you'd gone." And there were, I think, 3 or 4 people that I'd gone to school with or had lived in the Monterey Bay Area that were living there, and some of whom have stayed in touch since that night. And so it's really interesting to me, those connections. And Bruce McPherson is a county supervisor in Santa Cruz, had connections in San Luis Obispo and went to Cal Poly, and everybody, it's just surprising just how related it is, even though how distant some of the pieces are.
Yeah, it's immense, but it's still super connected. It feels like there's a lot of similarity in the issues, though obviously some very urban areas that don't fit really to kind of the slope. But the great part of Zoom, as we were just talking about, is we're so glad that you've been able to visit us here on this. You came to the candidate interviews over Zoom. It has maybe put out a little ability to create those different connections. So that at least is one benefit of the being in part of this Zoom conversation. You know, as you look ahead, the year ahead, you talked a little bit about your fire bill, and what are some of the other big items that are on your to-do list, and you know, where do you hope to move the needle on right out of the gate?
Well, the other thing we haven't talked about is I was a problem child for the Senate president, because I had been budget chair in the assembly, and I'd been a cabinet secretary, and I could have dropped into all these major things, and yet she had all these senators that had been patiently waiting for 2 years or 4 years or 6 years. So she compensated by appointing me to everything. So I'm on 1/3 of the standing committees in the Senate, and I'm on the audit. I'm the Senate lead on the Joint Audit Committee, and we just had this major hearing on the EDD audit and problem 2 days ago. I was in the LA Times yesterday morning talking about that at the hearing. And then I am chairing the Education Budget Subcommittee, which is half the budget. And so Wednesday we did a 2-hour hearing on the CSU system, and I did a Zoom with Jeff Armstrong and the Chancellor and other people earlier in the week, and we really pressed issues there. And I'm on Appropriations, I'm on Rules, which runs the House, and then I'm on Natural Resources, Judiciary, and Labor and Employment. And so there will be all these things that I don't get to choose. And so the school reopening issue is front and center right now. And I'm negotiating with the governor's office and negotiating with the assembly. And we are trying to get that done because it's been dead in the water. And we have to mitigate it among a bunch of different needs, like federal money is suddenly coming in. How do you pay for testing? Should teachers be vaccinated? There are kids with special needs or homeless or foster kids or English language learners that have fallen through the cracks in distance learning. And how do we make sure schools can open and open relatively soon, but do it safely? And it's a thorny issue. And I am trying to force the parties together and trying to get that moving. And so I hope in the next week we'll have very favorable news on that. And there are just things like that, you know, when I was on a Zoom with the governor a couple of months ago, and he came in the green room and there's a bunch of legislators there, and he looks across and he sees me and he goes, "Laird, what were you thinking?" Yeah, you know, and I said, well, it seemed like a good idea at the time. And so when I was running, I had all these ideas of what I wanted to do. And then we had a firestorm, and COVID has been out there. The budget has tanked a little. The economy has tanked. People are really in dire economic straits. And I'm spending time pounding on vaccine allocations and availability, and trying to see what can you stretch with regard to how people reopen. And when San Luis Obispo was included with Los Angeles in the area for sort of reopening, it's like I was pounding the governor's office and the health department, like, can't you do this differently? Can you break off Ventura, Santa Barbara, and San Luis Obispo? But I'm sorry, what's going on in downtown LA should not decide whether San Luis Obispo opens or closes. And so just things that I never anticipated would be issues are issues. And I think the tough thing right now is trying to be responsive to people, because businesses need help. The unemployment thing, some of the stuff that was picked up by the LA Times is I just decided to list some of the cases that I had faced. A professor sleeping in her car, and the car is about to be repossessed because they won't get the money out the door. And there's all these issues like that where this is life and death to people. And so we just have special staff members dedicated to nothing but trying to help move EDD stuff through the system. And so, while I have the priority of fire, and I have some other things that I'm going to be working on right now, there's just so many things that are right in front of us that are related to the pandemic and the economy that cry out for more immediate support.
Well, yeah, and we noticed how many committees you were sitting on, which was terrific for us, but also difficult for you, I'm sure. So we're appreciative that we have a representative that has such a wealth of experience inside government, especially during these critical times. So if folks want to connect with you, what's the best way for people to do that and stay up to date with your work on behalf of the 17th District?
There's a website. I think you can already sign up for the newsletter. If you can't, you will be able to soon. I'm taking any kind of emails at senator.laird and I think it's senate.ca.gov, but you can get it from that website. And I finally have a full staff in Sacramento as of this last Monday. I'm still 2 or 3 short in the district, but there's somebody, Clint Wyrick's in San Luis Obispo. I have somebody in Monterey, and I have somebody too in Santa Cruz. But the odd thing is that you can't go in any of the offices. I'm the only one allowed in the Capitol office, and that's the only office anybody's going into. And you go in there, and it's just completely empty except for a few papers on my desk. I finally took a framed sign from a city council campaign 30 years ago and put it in the lobby, so you would just actually know whose office it might be if you were allowed to come in. It is just. And the staff can't be together. We can only be together by Zoom. I did socially distanced walks with all the staff in Capitol Park, and this one great young staff member walked up, and I said, "Holy crap, you're 6'2". I had no idea from all the Zooms that was true. So, we're trying to deal with those kinds of, we're being responsive on the EDD things without everybody being able to be in the office or be together. So those are added challenges given the current situation.
Well, we're certainly appreciative of all the work that's going on, knowing the difficulties in what you're doing. Well, we always end on, it's already 12:30 here, and always end on one question. Wanted to know, is there anything you're looking forward to this weekend or something special?
Actually, I don't have anything scheduled for Sunday, and that hasn't happened in 3 weeks. And now this school negotiation thing is potentially moving a session into Sunday. And I'm like, no, finally one day, so we'll just see what happens.
Well, we hope you get a break. We really appreciate you coming and spending time with us and talking to us about what you're doing. And we'll certainly, as things change, we'd love to have you back and just update the community on what's going on.
I'd be happy to do it. And thanks for having me. And I look forward to working with everyone.
So thank you so much for all of you eating lunch with us today. We hope to see you next week at the same time, same place. If you have an idea for a working lunch guest or someone you want to learn more about, send us an email at slowchamber@slowchamber.org. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Have a wonderful weekend.